review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He is a missionary living in the mountains of Guatemala. No other than Mr. George Sisneros.
Daniel, how are you? Thank you for having me on.
Fabulous, Mr. George, and welcome to Book 101 Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself?
Yeah, I am actually 58 years old. I wrote and published my first book, the only book I've written and published. During COVID is when I wrote it, and I think a lot of people probably wrote or did something different during COVID. But I wrote a book, self-published it. It's available on Amazon, and it ended up becoming a bestseller in three different categories, which was exciting for me. Anybody who writes and sells books, unless you are a superstar,
Yes.
writing a book is not about making a ton of money, but it was something that I wanted to leave behind for my grandkids.
Indeed, a legacy to the world. And how did you personally define American dream before your journey? And how has that definition evolved since answering the call to Guatemala?
So the American dream, I think most Americans understand it as going to a good college, getting a good job, getting married, buying a home, having nowadays 1.5 kids and a dog. And that's kind of the American dream. We were living the American dream. We had all of that. We actually had 4 kids, 2 cars, a beautiful our dream home really, and yeah, and we made the decision to sell everything. We owned a couple of small businesses. So I was self employed, earning $100,000 a year. And we just sold it all. And we moved to the mountains of Guatemala to open what we've done is opened a small middle school in the middle of a village that didn't have a middle school. And we've been here for the last coming up on 13 years.
13 years. Oh my goodness. Congratulations, Mr. George, for empowering people out there to have a good education. Can you describe the pivotal moment or process when you felt God urging you to leave behind familiarity for the unknown?
Yeah, man, it really started back in 2010. I actually was just watching TV in my basement. I was watching my favorite sports team play football. I remember they lost, and I just had this feeling, this kind of conversation in my heart and in my mind, and I felt like it was a conversation with God, and I felt like God was asking me, "Do you love me?" And I replied, "Yes, I absolutely loved you." I felt like, I felt like I had a strong faith in those days, and I said, "I love you." And then I felt Him ask me, "Do you love me more than you love your wife?" And I had to think about it because I spend a lot of time with my wife. I wake up with her every day. We have coffee together. Whenever I'm excited about something, she's the first one I want to tell. So when I thought about it, I realized I think I love my wife more than I love God, and I was just being honest. And then He asked me in just again, just kind of in my heart and my mind, do you love me more than you love your kids? And that was easier for me to say because I would give my life for my kids. And I don't know if you're a parent or not, but when you have kids, if my kids needed a heart transplant, I would willingly open my heart and give them my heart. So I would die for my kids. And I just said, I love my kids more than I love you. And then I felt him ask me this kind of funny question. And that was, do you love me more than you love the Denver Broncos, the team I was watching? And I said, of course I do. And really, before the words could even come out, I realized what I was saying. I love you more than I love my favorite sports team. But the reality is that I had just spent 3 hours watching them play a game. And I did that every single Sunday, but I'd never spent 3 hours alone with God. I'd never spent 3 hours reading the Bible. I'd never spent 3 hours praying or talking to God in a row. I'd never done it ever in my life, but I did it every Sunday for my sports team, and it really made me think. And so that was kind of the beginning of my journey of just really trying to understand my faith and trying to understand, because it's easy really to say, for example, I'm a Christian, so it's easy to say that you're a Christian. It's easy. You just have to say the words, I'm a Christian. But really, does your life show that? Do your actions show that? And mine didn't. So I really was questioning whether or not I even loved God. And so a year later, I'd been praying for an entire year, just trying to understand God. And a year later, I ended up in Guatemala on a short-term trip, just visiting an orphanage. It wasn't, any special calling from God or anything like that. I just wanted to do it, and I did it. But I do remember that there was a feeding center on that trip. At the end of the trip, we went to this feeding center where we were feeding, 100, 150, I can't remember, a couple hundred kids. And I remember being at the back of the room, and as the music group came up, and they started playing at the front of the room, I was at the back of the room, and so I was able to see all these kids. They like stood up and they started singing and praising God. And these were poor kids. This was Zone Six of Guatemala City. They're poor, poor kids, and I could just see it that they loved God. And it was in that moment that I realized, you know what? I love God. Like a year later, this was almost to the day, a year later of praying and really searching for God and trying to understand my faith. I I realized I loved him, and I felt him calling me to follow him. And so when I got back from that trip, I talked to my wife. She wasn't with me. I explained to her what was going on and what my feelings were and what I felt God calling us to do to follow him. And I guess I felt like it was follow him to Guatemala, although he didn't say that. I just really felt that that's what I was supposed to do. And so that's when we sold everything. And that's how we came to that decision. We sold everything to really go live out our faith and not just talk about it.
Again, congratulations, Mr. George. Following God is something else. Do you love me? When do you publish this book?
Wow, you know what? I don't know if I actually have a date. I want to say 2021, maybe 2022. It was the end of COVID. It was during COVID that I was writing it, but yeah, I think it was early 2022. I don't remember anymore, but yeah, it's been really great. It's been a great opportunity to just give that to people to show them, what God has been doing in Guatemala for the last 10 years. It's really 50 stories about life as a missionary in Guatemala, but it's almost not anything about us, but more about God and the people of Guatemala. It just barely talks about us, which is something that I'm glad for.
How does choosing a life of service shape one's sense of self and purpose compared to pursuing conventional goals?
Well, I think here's what I now know. I think, years later, what I understand and what I really believe with my heart is that um, you can pursue life as a Christian. You can work or you can own a business. You can be in the United States. It doesn't matter where you are. You can serve God from where you are. I'm glad that we were called here and I'm glad we've done what we've done. But I do realize that, it's not something that you have to move to another country or anything like that. So how can you do that? First of all, there are people to love all around us. We just have to look and be aware of opportunities. There's opportunities to help people everywhere. It really doesn't take much, but I think most people are buried in their phones, buried on social media. I think most people are more worried about their own lives. And so I think the first thing is to really just get grounded yourself in your faith. So, if you do believe in Jesus Christ, or if you are a Christian, get ground in that faith, and then follow his direction, and he will lead you. He'll show you the next step. but he really can, he wants to work with willing people. And I think that's really all we had to offer. Back in 2012 was we said, yes, we'll do it. And we just had, willingness to offer. And so I think that it doesn't matter where you are. I think you can serve in all kinds of ways every day.
Totally agree with you, Mr. George. Totally agree. And what psychological struggles might arise when sacrificing financial stability for life dedicated to others?
What kind of psychological struggles? I don't know. I think I had more psychological struggles in the United States when I was burning myself out trying to, chase more money and more security, what I felt was security. And for the last 13 years, we have lived by the grace of God, and really just by people believing in what we're doing here, and the work that we're a part of, that we've been able to be here for that long. And so, when I was in the States, I felt like, so first of all, a couple of years before we went on the field, we were in massive debt. Like we had, I don't know, maybe it's massive. It was massive to us, but it was like $45,000 in debt, and most of that was credit cards and small loans. I think we had a second on, or kind of a, I don't know, some sort of loan from our house. And so we had $45,000 in debt, and we realized we needed to get serious about that. We had no idea we were going to be going to Guatemala, but we just felt like that was important to us to get out of debt, because it was just honestly the psychological difficulties were because of our debt. And I think anybody that is listening that has any significant amount of debt, it does put pressure on you that's unnecessary. So we decided, actually, Daniel, we decided to stop spending money for an entire year. We just said, okay, we're not going to spend any money except for, groceries, and we had a budget. Gas for the cars, electricity, the basics, the things that we absolutely had to, but we didn't buy anything. So we didn't buy Christmas gifts or birthday gifts. We didn't go out to dinners. We didn't go out to fast food. We literally cut everything off, and everything was off the table. And actually, it was almost easier to do that. If you're going to try to take some of it off the table, I think it's more difficult because there's more temptations. But with us, we just eliminated all spending, and we were out of debt in just over 1 year, $45,000, which, as it turns out, was really perfect, because you don't want to come onto the mission field as a Christian missionary with debt. That's just not a good idea. You also don't want to go onto the mission field, with a struggling marriage. We didn't. We had a very, very strong marriage. We were madly in love, and we're still madly in love. I can say that, it's been growing, for, I don't know. Let me tell you this: our first 7 years were brutal. Our first year was murder. It was absolutely the worst year of our marriage. The next 6 years were very, very bad. And but at that seventh year, things changed, and from then on, it's just been getting better and better. And we were able to make this decision because we were not financially burdened, and because we were madly in love.
Congratulations for being madly in love, Mr. George. That is a good marriage. Indeed. And how do cultural or spiritual belief inform the decision to reject the American dream for service?
Um, what Ask that? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yes, how do cultural or spiritual belief inform the decision to reject the American dream for service? Just
So
like what
for
you
us,
choose today.
yeah, for sure. It's really all for us now. We are fully in. So, back in 2010, it was hard for me to say that I loved God, period. Like, it was easy to
Yes.
say, but I didn't. And so really, our faith. our Christian faith has guided every step since we've come onto the field, and even, of course, making the decision to do the work that we do. It has all been through prayer and faith and trust in the Holy Spirit guiding us. And so it is formed every single decision that we've made. Unfortunately, I don't we don't feel like God is lighting up the entire staircase. What it feels like is God has he lights up a stair or a step at a time. I'm not kidding you. It is like, even when we felt called to Guatemala, my wife and I were talking about it. We really didn't know what that meant. We didn't know what we would do here. We didn't know how we had some savings, and then when we sold our businesses and our home, we did have some money, but it wasn't going to last for a long period of time. And so we didn't even know how we would be able to survive financially over a long period of time. Would we just have to come back in a couple of years? But God really has just revealed, just one step at a time. He continues to do that today. But I do feel like he trusts us with a few more steps at a time, but it is never the full staircase. And so all of our decisions to leave the United States, to shed ourselves, honestly, I'll be honest, Daniel, it's taken us years to kind of shed a lot of our beliefs in money and material things and just lifestyle and culture of the United States. It's probably, I'm not going to lie, we've been here 13 years. It's probably taken us 10 years to just kind of shed some of that. It is, when you grow up in materialism, and you grow up, especially nowadays with social media, when you grow up in a society that is constantly pushing you to do more, and to succeed in bigger ways, it's really, really hard to get out of. When the Israelites left slavery and they left Egypt for the Promised Land, they crossed the Red Sea and they were in the desert for 40 years. The thing is that that trip should have, if they would have had a map, and if they would have gone in a straight line, they should have been able to cross that desert in 11 days. Yet they were in the desert for 40 years for various reasons. One of those reasons was just because of their disobedience and unbelief in God, number one. But bigger, not bigger, another big reason was because if they would have entered the promised land immediately, they would have carried in with them the culture, and really the they would have carried Egypt into the promised land with them. They had been in Egypt for hundreds of years, so they would have taken that into the promised land with them. And so I feel a little bit the same way. When we got to Guatemala, I could tell you, and we still are kind of shedding some of our cultural beliefs. Even to this day, we're shedding things. And not listen we are so proud to be Americans, and we are so incredibly grateful. We adopted 5 kids, and this last year they all became, after a very long process, they were able to become U.S. citizens, have U.S. passports. So what that affords people, it's a huge blessing. So we love America. But that being said, we were drowning in a lot of the societal, rules, unwritten rules of materialism, and pressure from that. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
Very well said, Mr. George. Beautifully articulated. Before we go on to our discussion, I just want to shout out my ranking tops for the last 30 days, because in Mali I got number 9 on the Apple charts, United Arab Emirates 11 on the Apple chart, El Salvador, Uruguay, Norway, Canada, Slovenia, Macedonia, South Africa, and many more. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast because this podcast is created to empower writers or authors all over the world, like Mr.
That's amazing.
George.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. So, how do you individuals cope with guilt, doubt, or societal judgment when their sacrifices feel overwhelming?
Um, yeah, I got to tell you, I don't feel that society has necessarily judged us. We have had along the way, for example, when we left the United States, we had a couple of people who said, "Hey, why leave the best country in the world?" A good friend of mine wrote me a long note, and he said, I don't think you really understand what you're leaving behind and what for, just to go, serve your religion is what he called it. And so he just didn't understand. He felt probably like he was losing a friend. So I think there was that pressure. My wife's best friend was, basically stopped talking to us and really stopped talking to her outside of maybe once or twice a year, that she, well, not even that. And so unfortunately, we lost some relationships along the way. They just didn't agree with what we were doing. I think ultimately it was, personal relationships that felt hurt that we were leaving, and we were leaving them is maybe what they felt. My mom, as a matter of fact, when I told her I got back from that trip, I got back. I want to say it was like December 2nd of 2011. And I told her that we were going to be selling everything. We're going to sell our house. She was just so proud of the lives we had built. And so when I told her we were selling everything and moving to Guatemala, she thought we were joking. And then she told me, "I will never forgive you," because we were taking her grandkids away. And so a week before we landed in Guatemala City, she called me up and she said, "I love you and I forgive you and I understand what you're doing." And that was really the end of it. We have a great relationship, and we talk, every single week, multiple times a week. And so I think that there are definitely pressures that come along with moving. And honestly, when you move to another country, it is hard. Probably the hardest thing is leaving friends and family behind, but we feel like our calling is important and worth it, and so we're glad to do it.
Definitely, it's worth it, Mr. George, and congratulations for doing that. Obeying that is something else. Before we wrap up our discussion for today, Mr. George, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and book 101 review in fifth season as well. Comedy 101 in second season, food 101 in fifth season, geography 101 in third season, and of course my law 101 in its first season, love letters in third season, and my baby podcast, mental health 101. Movie 101 review and Music 101 in each fourth season, and Science 101 and Sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. Mr. George, how do you hope your story inspires others to rethink their own path and listen for divine guidance?
What I hope is that people explore their faith. I think it's important. I think it's worth it. um, I believe that there's a creator. Not everybody believes in God, and not everybody believes in a creator, and that's fine if they believe that. I'm not going to try to convince somebody, against their will. But if they're open to it, I think it's important that, for example, I look outside and, there's a building next door. And if you look at that building, I can't deny that someone built that. Someone created that building. Maybe multiple people created it. There might have been an architect, or there might have been, certainly there was a builder. And I think the same thing, if you look around and you see the birds and you see this earth and you see the stars and you see everything working in perfect harmony, when you see that, um, you it didn't just come from nowhere. There was a creator. Just like that building, when you look at it, nobody looks at that building and says, "Oh, well, it just appeared there." It's the same thing with this world. So I would just hope that, I would be able to inspire someone to just this is in no way confrontational, but just explore your faith. And go ahead, take a look at the Bible. And I would recommend that someone read the first four chapters of the New Testament. Why is that? Because the first four chapters are about the life of Jesus Christ. And read those four chapters and then make a decision for yourself. If you're going to read those four chapters, it's one of three things. He was either the promised Messiah, uh, he was either God, or he was a liar, like a crazy liar. And so if you read through that, if you read through those four books, and you come to the conclusion that there's a possibility that this was the promised Messiah, this is God Himself, then explore that. Or you get to the end of it and you're like, yeah, I don't buy it. I believe he was a liar and he was a crazy liar. That's fine. But I just recommend, and I would hope that someone would at least take the opportunity to explore that in a on your own, non-confrontational. This is not me trying to push my faith on you or anything like that. I hope that for you. I hope that for anybody listening, that they would at least take that opportunity.
Mr. George Sisneros, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and knowledge to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy as well as your book, Do You Love Me?
Thank you. Well, listen, Do You Love Me is on Amazon. Somehow it accidentally became a bestseller in three different categories. It's not something that we make a lot of money on, but I would love for you to read it. You can also go to coveredinhisdust.org, and you can sign up to get a newsletter. I basically send out my Bible notes once a week for people to read, and it's a growing community. So I would love for people to check that out as well.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. George Sisneros, because if you support him, more and more and more empowering books to come, more and more empowering verses of the Bible to come. So, Mr. George, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for your very interesting questions, and I appreciate it.
Modicon people, see you soon.